If you've ever asked yourself, why can't I lose weight anymore? Here are 6 questions to ask yourself. Welcome to another episode of Sister in Scrubs. I'm Dr. Rebecca, family doctor.
I'm Dr. Vanessa, pharmacist.
So, Vanessa, what is the first question, the very first question someone should ask themselves if they're stuck, if they feel like they've done everything, and they can't lose weight? What is the first thing that they should look at?
So, one of the first things that we look at with our patients at the clinic is protein. So, we really look at their food intake, but not just the calories, really ensuring they're having enough protein throughout the day. So, studies do show that to improve body composition, to lose not just weight, but also to have fat loss, we need an increase in muscle mass. So, that's where protein kind of comes in. Protein helps to synthesize muscle. So, paired with obviously a strength training program, protein will help you increase muscle mass and in turn, not just lose weight, but lose fat.
And if I were to ask you, if someone asks you, how much protein do I need to eat? And they're not on our in-body scan, like what would we tell someone to aim for as a protein as of today, for example?
So, general rule of thumb, if someone obviously doesn't have access to an in-body composition scale like we do at the clinic with our patients, in general, we recommend to have anywhere between 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. Obviously, this also depends on your activity level. So, if you're someone that is just starting off, I think that 30 grams per meal is a good place to start. And ideally, as you're progressing with your strength training and also your protein intake, is to kind of work your way up to 40 grams per meal. If you're an athlete, for example, this might not apply to you. You might need more protein to really help support your muscle mass.
Another way to look at it is that general recommendations show that 1.6 to about 2.2 grams per kilogram of weight is a good number for a daily protein intake. Just to step back a little bit, when we're talking about the 30 to 40 grams of protein, entails that you have 3 meals a day. And we actually recommend our patients to have 3 meals a day plus 2 high-protein snacks. So generally, that would look like 100 to 120 grams of protein a day. But more accurately, it would be to take your weight in kilograms and then multiply it by 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram.
And that depends on your activity level.
It depends on your activity.
If you're someone that's very active, then you're more on the 2.2 gram per kilo spectrum. If you're someone that's very sedentary, then maybe we would go more for like a 1.6 or 1.8. But again, this is more of an estimation. Really, to have precise values, you would need some form of a body composition scale.
And actually, I was listening to a podcast, and some people actually recommend that you look at the lean body mass and multiply that by 2.2. So that just says that you need more protein than you actually think on a daily basis. So most of our patients are very deficient in protein, and they don't understand why they have cravings, and that pushes them a little bit back on their weight loss journey.
Another thing also is we do lose muscle with time. So as we know, natural biological process is losing about 3 to 8% of muscle mass per
More in the
decade.
8%, yeah.
8%. So obviously, the less muscle you have, as we know, slows down your metabolism. And the slower metabolism you have, the less calories you're burning at rest. Obviously, with time, we do lose muscle, but there's other ways that we lose muscle as well. If we're repeatedly doing diets, restricting ourselves, again, not ensuring that we're having enough protein. The types of exercises that we do, if we're someone that's very active, we claim ourselves to be super active, training 4 or 5 days a week. Sometimes I have patients like that I see at the clinic. But when we really break down the types of exercises they're doing, mainly cardio based, whether it's, like steady state running, or if it's Zumba, if it's just the treadmill, the Stairmaster, and not incorporating some form of resistance training, that's when you do see muscle kind of go down.
Sorry, cardio is great for your cardiovascular health, for endurance. However, if you're looking to gaining muscle mass, you absolutely need to be lifting weights.
So what is the ideal, you would say, strength training schedule? Like how many days a week should people aim for?
I mean, if I have someone that is not strength training at all, I would say let's at least start by one session of 20 to 30 minutes a week just to get them started. But ideally, our goal is going to be to having at least 3 days and even 4 days of a week of strength training if we can.
Other things that you could do as an add-on is always great. We have some patients that do Pilates, some patients that you do yoga. I have some patients that also incorporate, swimming, again, steady
Spinning.
state spinning, steady state running. So those are all good add-ons that you could do to the strength training. Strength training should always be the basis, and anything that you do on top of that should be considered as an add-on. So the basics should be strength training for sure. That's some place you could start to really help increase your muscle mass. So what is one other one of many other reasons why people don't see weight loss?
We have a lot of patients like this. If they've been on different types of diets and they keep on trying different trendy diets or chronically dieting. And what we mean by dieting is really, let's say, reducing their calories and not really looking into what are we eating? Are we having a high protein diet? And they're trying these different trends over and over again, seeing results, minimal results, but always gaining the weight back. So if I were to ask you, if someone has tried many diets in the past, has lost weight and then gained it back, why aren't they able to maintain that weight loss? What's the biggest difficulty that patients would have?
So, first of all, if you're chronically dieting, your body is on consistent restriction mode. So, we have what we call metabolic adaptation. So, your body kind of adapts to that type of diet, that 1200 calories a day. So, your metabolism then kind of thinks that you're in survival mode and adapts to it. So, it slows down your metabolism. When we're talking about 1200 calories a day, that's not a lot. For most people, it's a pretty low caloric intake. So your metabolism adapts to it, sees it as a stress, thinks that there's no, food or fuel source coming in, and kind of puts it in survival mode. So then your metabolism kind of slows down and goes to the 1200 calories a day. 1200 calories is not a lot because if your metabolism is at around 1200 calories a day, that doesn't leave much room for eating at a deficit to be at weight loss. Our goal would be to help increase your metabolism, and there's multiple ways to do that. Obviously, we know that muscle is a metabolically active tissue, which means that it burns calories at rest. So that's why we talk about muscle and protein so much, because when you increase muscle, you increase your metabolism. And in turn, by having a high metabolism, then that's when weight loss kind of kicks in, and not just weight loss, fat loss. So that's probably one of the main reasons why when you're chronically dieting, it's not a good habit to have because your metabolism will adapt and then it'll become harder for you to actually lose weight.
And not only that, when patients lose weight with these types of diets, most of the time they're not physically active at the same time or they don't do any strength training. So what happens is 75% of what we lose is going to be fat, but there's that 25% of weight loss that is muscle mass loss. So when you lose weight, but then after for XYZ reason you stop this diet or you want to go back to your previous eating habits and your metabolism is already slower, right? So you're burning less calories at rest and you go back to your previous eating habits where you were probably eating more calories. So essentially, you're eating more than you're burning. You're going to gain weight as fat. So you're not going to gain back that muscle that you lost. So what this means is that our basal metabolic rate is going lower and lower, but we're eating more and more calories. That's where over time patients see a weight gain and a difficulty losing it.
So, what would you say? Like, we talked about, gaining muscle mass. We talked about chronic dieting. We talked about incorporating protein in diet. What is something else that patients often get wrong, which could sometimes explain why they're not able to lose the weight?
Another one of my favorite subjects is sleep. A lot of our patients have either a bad quality or a bad quantity sleep, or sometimes both. So when we're talking about a bad quantity or low quantity sleep, is that patients are not having at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So studies show that when you have 7 to 9 hours of good quality sleep, that's where you have good restorative sleep. So patients, for example, who have kids, who have a very busy schedule, or who have 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night, it's not enough. And what happens is that when you're not having good quality or good quantity sleep, your metabolism will be slow. So that means no matter what type of diet I give you, what type of exercise we give you in order to lose fat, we're going to have a hard time because your metabolism is already slow. So in order to fix this, what we have to do is to have good quality and good quantity sleep. Now, when we're talking about good quality sleep, this is, are we having all the different stages of sleep? Are we having restorative sleep? I also work at a sleep clinic, so I work a lot with patients who have sleep breathing disorders like sleep apnea, for example. And patients who have these type of sleep breathing disorders have a slower metabolism because when we have sleep apnea, what happens is that throughout the night we have pauses in breathing and our oxygen is lower. So there's essentially not enough oxygen going to the brain. This causes microarousal, so meaning your brain is waking up throughout the night multiple times, even though you don't realize because you don't have enough oxygen. So, this is essentially the alarm system of our brain waking up. So, what happens is you feel like you probably slept throughout the night, but you wake up feeling super tired. You would still sleep even though you slept 6, 7, 8 hours, and you're tired throughout the day, you're nodding off.
Most people actually consider this as their norm. They think like a lot of patients that come see us, we obviously assess, nutrition and exercise, but also sleep, stress, hormones. And when we talk about sleep, a lot of times when we ask them how their sleep is, oh, I'm just tired all day. And I just figure that that was just normal. It's not normal. These are,
Warning
first
signs.
warning signs. These are signs and symptoms that something is wrong and it needs to be addressed.
And, they try to compensate with energy drinks or coffee. Like, I had a patient today who told me that he has 6, 7 coffees a day and his last one is at 10 p.m. Caffeine's half life is around 10 to 12 hours. So that means that if you're drinking coffee at noon, by 10 p.m., you've had only eliminated half of the caffeine that you drank. So just picture how that can impact your sleep.
Some people might say that, oh, like I'm able to fall asleep. It doesn't really affect me. You might not feel it, but you're not able to reach that deep sleep. And that's why when you wake up in the morning, yes, you were able to do your full night of sleep, but your brain was in constant stimulation mode, which is why you're kind of dragging yourself throughout the whole day. So all this to say that sleep does have a huge impact. It does also affect your hunger hormones
Yes.
and your satiety hormones. So if you're not getting enough quality and quantity of sleep, then your cravings are all over the place. You obviously have cravings not for high protein foods. Most of the time, it's high sugar, high fat foods, foods that are not necessarily good for you, ultra processed foods. So that's when the weight loss is kind of hindered. You might be doing all of the stuff around it, whether it's, doing the exercise and the exercise and the nutrition. But if your sleep is not dialed down, if we're not figuring out the root cause of your sleep issues, then that's always going to be a problem because again, it's like swimming against the current. You're not addressing the full problem. So, we talked about exercise, we talked about nutrition, we talked about chronic dieting, we talked about sleep. So what is something else that people are missing out on when we want to lose weight? Why can't they lose the extra fat or extra weight after, practicing all of the other things we just talked about?
If you're doing everything that we just said, but you're living a very stressful lifestyle, just that in itself can hinder your weight loss progress. So, why are we saying this? Is because, for example, if I have a patient who does have a high protein diet, but that is very, very stressed and has a certain relationship with food of eating food when they're very stressed, so they can start having a high caloric high sugar diet because they're stress eating at this point. So we really have to address certain patterns with patients when it comes to having a stressful lifestyle if there's a certain relationship with food.
There's also binge eating disorders that we have to address. As health professionals, it's important that these are things that we don't miss with our patients, because we could be doing all of the other things, but if the mental health aspect of it is not addressed, then that can again be a hindrance when we're talking about weight loss.
Not only binge eating, but if ever, for example, I have a patient going through a burnout at work, going through a death in the family, going through a depressive episode, or has a generalized anxiety disorder, and we're trying on the sideline to have a high protein diet, to have exercise and whatnot, and they're still dealing with this mental health aspect. Just that in itself, at a chronic exposure to cortisol, this in itself will make their weight loss even harder. So that's why we don't ignore that aspect when patients come to see us. It's something that we ask, it's something that we screen very, very often.
And a lot of times, sleep and stress are very intertwined.
Yeah.
So if we do have patients that are going through, mental health disorders, oftentimes their sleep will be compromised. And as we know, when sleep is compromised, then that can affect weight loss. It can affect your hunger hormones. It can affect the cravings. So all this to say that all of these pillars go hand in hand. When we talk about weight loss, we can't just look at what you're eating and how much you're exercising. We have to look at all of your body as a whole. This is why we talk about a holistic approach, is really looking at the full picture and not just looking at one part of the problem. And another thing that sometimes patients can affect also their weight loss process is hormones. So I know that Dr. Rebecca, you do assess patients for like the hormones, making sure that everything is in check. If we've ticked off all the boxes, we've done the high protein diet, we've done the strength training, we've done the making sure that the sleep is good, making sure that stress levels are under control, then oftentimes we have to dig a little deeper and see if there's another problem we're missing out on.
So when you come in for our weight loss program, during the first appointment, we ask you all these bunch of questions. It's a long appointment, and you're going to get most of the time a paper to do a blood test. So we do have a metabolic and a hormonal assessment in the blood test. So we obviously look at if there's any risk of prediabetes, diabetes, cholesterol, but we also, depending on the situation, depending on the age of the person, we look at hormones. And let's say for PCOS, we look at perimenopause or menopause. These are things that thyroid, these are things that we have to assess beforehand in order to make sure that whatever we're going to prescribe or we're going to suggest around it actually works out, because your hormones can greatly impact the way you lose weight and the way you maintain your weight loss as well. So
Can
that's
impact your
super
metabolism as well.
exactly.
And as we said, we need to kind of optimize metabolism when we talk about weight loss and fat loss. So if all of these elements resonate with you, make sure to give our podcast a follow. We're posting episodes every week, things that we see at the clinic, things that we talk about with our patients on a regular basis that we want to make available to general population, because we do believe that this is common knowledge that people should have. There's a lot of information out there. It can get very confusing to filter out what's real and what's not real. So we're here to give you science-backed information and help you really optimize your long-term health and wellness.
See you on the next episode.